Born from the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act, the federal minimum wage was envisioned by architects like Francis Perkins and Senator Hugo Black as a vital shield against starvation wages. What began as a 25-cent per hour promise to protect the health and well-being of the American workforce has, decades later, hit a historic and controversial standstill. Since 2009, the national pay floor has remained frozen at $7.25 per hour, marking the longest period of stagnation in its history and setting the stage for a modern ideological tug-of-war over the value of labor. The current landscape is defined by a fierce legislative battle, pitting ambitious new proposals against entrenched economic fears. While advocates like Senator Bernie Sanders and Representative Bobby Scott push for a $17 per hour standard by 2030, other radical measures seek to tie wages to poverty thresholds, potentially reaching over $26. This drive for a living wage faces stiff opposition from business coalitions who warn of shuttered storefronts and rising consumer costs. The tension is further complicated by shifting executive priorities, evidenced by the recent rescinding of higher wage floors for federal contractors, leaving thousands of workers caught in the middle of a volatile political pendulum. As of April 2026, despite a flurry of bills like the Give America a Raise Act, the federal minimum wage remains anchored in the past, unable to clear the hurdles of a divided Congress. The nation now stands at a critical crossroads. Will the legislative deadlock finally break to reflect modern economic realities? Or will the federal floor remain a static relic while the cost of living continues its relentless climb? The resolution of this enduring conflict will not only define the financial fate of millions, but also determine if the original promise of the New Deal can survive in a new century.
I've watched this exact fight play out more times than I care to count. Different fighters, same bruises after. Both sides swear they've got it figured out, but they never do.
Welcome to The Friction Point, broadcasting live from Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Tonight's question is as basic and as mean as they come. Is the minimum wage a real tool to fight poverty? Or are we handing people a pocket knife and calling it a sword? Joining me tonight are Sam, a veteran political strategist who'll tell you how this fight plays out before the first punch lands. Eris, a free market economist who believes the laws of supply and demand don't negotiate. Maya, a social policy strategist keeping this debate tethered to the people actually living it. Luna, a digital activist who thinks the entire wage model needs to be scrapped and rebuilt from the ground up. And Cypher, an independent analyst who wants to know whose hand is on the lever before he trusts any of this. Right here in Myrtle Beach, thousands of workers run the hotels, the restaurants, the shops all along the strip. And most of them earn within $1 or $2 of the state minimum. Tonight we want to know whether that floor is holding people up or holding them back. Let's build our cases. Eris, you're up first.
A price floor on wages is the same as a price floor on anything else. You set it above what the market will bear. You get more people looking for work than there are jobs available. Some of those people would have had work without the floor. Now they don't. The logic is simple. Make something more expensive and people buy less of it. You can argue about the size of the effect all night. You can't argue away the mechanism.
The mechanism works both ways. Without a floor, the bottom of the labor market doesn't correct itself. It falls further. Not in a textbook, in real life. The federal minimum hasn't moved in 15 years. Try paying rent in this town on $7.25 an hour. That floor isn't set above the market rate here. It's set below what it costs to survive. Without it, the bottom doesn't hold. It just drops.
Here's what I know about this fight. The minimum wage is a lever, and every politician in both parties knows exactly what it does when you pull it. The crowd cheers, the headline writes itself. And meanwhile, the guy running the carousel down the boardwalk is doing math at 2 in the morning. He figures out he can run the ride with 2 workers instead of 3, or cut everyone to 25 hours, or raise the price of a token and see who walks away. The workers who kept their jobs got a raise. The ones who didn't make the cut don't show up in the speech. I've seen this ride run before. The view from the front doesn't match the view from the back.
Can we please stop treating this like it's still 1975? The debate you're all framing, raise the floor or don't, is real, but it's the last generation's fight. A third of the workforce now does some form of gig or platform work. Those workers don't have a floor. They're classified as contractors. The height restriction on the old ride doesn't matter if half the workforce can't even get in line for it. We're arguing over the rules of a game the economy already started walking away from.
Okay, before we build our cases, one question. Who actually wrote the last major minimum wage bill that moved in Congress? Not the sponsors. I want to know who drafted the language and who put the specific number on the page. Because here's what I know. The biggest companies in the country can absorb a wage hike without blinking. They raise prices 50 cents. Nobody cancels their reservation. The ones who can't absorb it are the small operators, the family running the lunch counter on Kings Highway. So when the big money goes quiet in this debate, I start paying very close attention. Because when they go quiet, it usually means they've already done their due diligence.
Eris, you said the mechanism is clear. Give me something concrete. What does it look like when that mechanism actually breaks something?
San Jose, 2013. The city raised the floor to $10. Fast food employment dropped measurably in the following year, while employment in surrounding areas held steady. Restaurant owners cut shifts, moved workers from full-time to part-time, and brought in self-order kiosks faster than they'd planned. The jobs didn't vanish overnight. They shrank. The worker who kept the job earned more per hour. The one cut to 28 hours took home less. That's not a prediction. It's what the data shows happened.
Maya, is Eris describing a real pattern or a worst-case story?
He's describing one study, in one city, in 1 year, and using it to describe an entire country. The weight of the research, dozens of studies and multiple methods, shows that moderate, phased increases produce wage gains that outpace job losses in most markets. The CBO estimated a $15 federal floor would lift roughly 900,000 people out of poverty. Yes, it also projected job losses at the margin, but Aris holds that second number up in the air. He quietly puts the first one down.
That's incorrect. I hold both numbers up. And I also note that the people who lose jobs aren't in the 900,000 total. They're subtracted from it.
Oh, come on, Aris. Nobody said they weren't real.
Cypher, you raised the question of who benefits. But, Sam, who actually wins if and when the floor does move?
Well, if the hike is modest and phased, the big players absorb it, and the small operators sweat. If it's sharp and fast, the small operators fold, and the big players pick up the market share they left behind. That's not a conspiracy. That's just how competitive pressure works. The level and the timeline matter more than the principle. Nobody in the political fight wants to slow down long enough to say that out loud.
And who decides the level and the timeline? It's the people in the room when the bill gets drafted. Which brings me back to my original question, which still hasn't been answered.
Because the answer to who lobbied for a higher floor doesn't cancel the outcome for the worker who got the raise. The motive of the messenger doesn't wipe out the benefit to the recipient.
Unless the benefit has side effects the messenger didn't put on the label.
I want to pull this back down to something you can actually see. The person working minimum wage in this town right now has one question. Can I pay rent?
At $7.25, the answer is no. At $12, the answer is maybe. At $15, probably yes if hours don't get trimmed. That's the whole debate, reduced to a single line.
And the person whose hours got trimmed is also on that line. You have to be sure to count them, too.
I'm not saying they aren't there. I'm saying the ratio favors the raise. And the people who argue hardest against it are usually not the ones standing on that line.
Based on which studies?
Based on the majority of peer-reviewed research.
Based on research in markets that don't look anything like a seasonal coastal economy.
Or a rural county. Or a manufacturing town. Or anywhere that isn't your preferred counterexample.
Sam, straight question. Even if the floor works on its own terms, does it actually move the poverty needle in any meaningful way?
No, and I'll say it plain. The real drivers of poverty in this country are housing costs, healthcare, and childcare. A worker making $13 an hour is still broke if half of that check goes to rent, and she's paying out of pocket for a sick kid. Look, the floor raises the income line. It doesn't touch the expense side at all. It's a real tool with real limits. The problem is it gets sold as the solution when it's one piece of a much bigger repair job that, sadly, we don't have the political will to start.
And the answer to, it doesn't fix everything, is not, therefore don't do it. It's do it and do the rest. The rest takes 5 years and a budget war. The floor is the one thing that actually moves.
And the thing that moves gets used as the reason to stop at the thing.
That's a political failure, not a policy failure.
But they're not separate things.
Can I say the thing that both of them are dancing around? The minimum wage is a patch. A real patch on a real crack. But you can patch a pipe that's still under pressure and call it fixed, and then the next break is worse. The crack isn't the wage. It's that we built an economy where full-time work doesn't cover basic costs. The patch buys time. It doesn't fix the pipe.
Every worker in a flooded house right now needs the patch. You fix the pipe after you stop the water.
Unless the patch raises the pressure and the pipe bursts somewhere else.
Unless the house floods while you're arguing about the metaphor.
For what it's worth, you're both right and both wrong. And the fight between you is exactly the kind of fight that keeps the structural conversation off the table. I'm not saying that's your fault. I'm saying someone benefits from it.
We're going to close out this round. Eris, Maya, you've had the sharpest exchange on the core economics. One final thought each before we break.
The floor is a real tool with a real cost. Some of that cost is paid by the very workers you're trying to help. The honest poverty conversation has to say that out loud.
The floor works for most workers most of the time. The people arguing hardest against it should be clear about who they're actually protecting. The workers at the bottom or the margin at the top.
The cases are built, and the fault lines are exactly where they need to be. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Here's where we stand. One side says the floor lifts people up, and the weight of evidence is with them. The other says it creates real losers who don't show up in the headline. And every single panelist agrees it isn't the complete fix, which raises the only question worth asking. Is incomplete still worth the fight? Sam put his finger on it when he talked about the carousel operator doing math at 2 in the morning. The ride that looks fine from the front and quietly breaks the operator in the back. The real question tonight isn't whether to put up the sign. It's who the park was built for, and whether the workers running the rides will ever own a piece of it. This is the friction point. Maya, you've made the case for the floor all night. Here's the sharp edge of Eris's argument. If you raise it knowing some workers lose jobs, and you do it anyway. Are you making peace with that trade-off? Or are you just pretending it isn't one?
I'm making peace with it. Some workers at the very margin lose hours or positions. That's a real cost, and I won't dress it up. But the research is clear that the gain outweighs the loss in most markets most of the time. You make the best call with the tools you've got. You don't refuse to run the ride because one person might trip getting on.
Most markets, most of the time, is doing a lot of work in that sentence. In a thin margin, seasonal economy like this one, those margins are real businesses. Real people who put their savings into something and lose it when the math stops adding up. You can't net that out against a policy average.
They adapt. Every major market that's raised the floor has...
Not every market.
Let me finish. Every major market that's raised the floor has seen wages go up and employment hold near pre-hike levels. The collapse that gets predicted every single time doesn't show up.
Because you look at the aggregate and skip right past the margin. The sector-level data tells a different story, and you've read the same papers I have.
The sector data is mixed, and you are pulling the worst cuts to make the general case.
I'm not pulling worst cuts. I'm naming the people you're writing off as acceptable losses.
I am not writing anyone off.
You just said you're making peace with the trade-off.
You're both right. That's the whole problem. The aggregate holds, the margins hurt, and nobody in this fight is willing to design for both at the same time. Regional carve-outs, transition support for small operators, that's a harder sell than a number on a sign. But it's the only version of this policy that doesn't leave someone on the floor.
Luna just said something useful. Note the time.
I'd appreciate it if you could stop sounding shocked every time that happens.
I was agreeing with you.
Not with that face you weren't.
Cypher, you've been sitting on something. Let's hear it.
Okay, look. Here's the piece nobody wants to say. The minimum wage is the most visible part of the poverty debate, which means it soaks up all the oxygen. And when it does, the housing fight, the healthcare fight, the childcare fight, the things Sam correctly said are the real drivers of poverty, those fights stay on the shelf. I'm not calling the floor bad policy. I'm saying that when you keep the big fight small and visible, someone benefits from that. And the minimum wage is the perfect tool for keeping it small.
And that's where you lose me, Cypher. See, you're describing an outcome and calling it a strategy. The big fights don't get done because they're hard, they're expensive, and they are politically toxic. It's not because someone managed the debate. Give institutional incompetence some credit before you hand it to cunning.
What's the difference when the result is the same?
Good question. The difference is the fix. If it's incompetence, better politics get you there. If it's design, you're in a different kind of war entirely. Getting that difference wrong wastes real time and real people.
What if the incompetence is useful enough that nobody bothers to fix it?
Then you're describing a failing state, not a wage policy problem.
I'm describing the country we live in right now.
And I've been living in it longer than you. Yes, it's slow and bent and serving the wrong people, but that's not the same as broken. That's fixable. Slower than you'd like, but fixable.
Slower than I'd like. Fine if you're watching. If you're the one waiting, slow is your whole life.
Luna, you've been burning down every argument on this panel all night. Tell me what the right fight actually looks like. Not what's wrong with everyone else. What's the play?
Portable benefits tied to the worker, not the job. Platform-based compensation floors enforced at the network level, not the employer level. A base income structure that doesn't depend on how your employer classifies you. The minimum wage debate is a fight about the terms of employment. The real fight is about whether employment is still the right frame for how we organize work and pay at all.
Who passes that? What Congress? What timeline?
You always ask that as the reason not to think bigger.
I ask it because it turns a good idea into an actual policy instead of a speech.
And you've been asking it so long that realistic just means whatever's already been tried and fell short.
What I call realistic, you call defeatist. You know what I call it when someone promises a full rebuild and delivers nothing? Same failure. The workers at 725 either way.
The workers at 725 because people like you kept settling for the increment.
The workers at 725 because comprehensive reform has never made it through cloture, and the increment kept her from falling to $6.
40 years of that logic, and here we are.
To finish my point, 40 years of burn it all down has moved the real floor exactly how much?
We're not done yet.
Eris, in this town specifically, you've got big resort chains on one end and family operations on the other. Does a flat floor make any sense when the operators are that different?
No. A flat floor is a blunt tool in a market with this kind of spread. The Marriott on the Strip absorbs $15 without touching a single budget line. The family running a 10-room motel on the 17 bypass is on a knife edge. Same floor, completely different outcomes. The right design is tiered. Big employers, small employers, regional cost of living built in. But that's complicated to pass, so we pick a number, apply it everywhere, and argue about the casualties afterward.
The tiered approach sounds clean until you watch employers reclassify every worker they can as a contractor to duck under the threshold. Complexity creates the loophole. A clean floor is harder to game.
A clean floor is also harder on the people you're claiming to protect.
You keep saying that. The evidence says otherwise in most cases.
In the median case, the margin cases are still real people.
Every policy has margin cases. You can't let the tail wag the dog on every decision.
When the tail is a family who put their savings into a ride and get put out of business by a policy that wasn't built with them in mind, it's not a tail, it's a person.
And so is the worker who gets the raise.
I never disputed that.
Then stop framing the only real harm in this debate as the one on the employer side.
Cypher. Eris made the small business case. You made the same case in the arguments round. If you're a small operator in this town right now, are you protected by this policy or sacrificed by it?
Sacrificed. Not by design necessarily, but the effect is identical. A $15 floor is manageable for the chain operator and hard for the independent. The chain gets a PR win for being a fair wage employer. The independent cuts staff, raises prices, or folds. When it folds, the chain picks up the customers. I'm not saying the big companies wrote that outcome into the bill. I'm saying they ran the numbers, saw it coming, and didn't push back.
That's consistent with how large companies behave in a competitive market. It's not evidence of intent. It's evidence of rational actors running rational math.
The outcome is the same either way, Sam. Intent doesn't matter to the operator who closed.
Intent matters for designing the fix. You patch a design flaw. You can't patch a conspiracy.
No, but you can stop calling the policy neutral when the effects clearly aren't.
Maya, Cypher just said small operators get sacrificed. Is that an acceptable cost?
No, and it should be built into the design. Small business credits during the transition period, phased timelines, real support for operations that can't absorb the change in the short run. The answer to "this hurts small operators" is not, therefore don't raise the wage. It's design the transition so you're not shutting down the carousel to save the Ferris wheel.
That's the most sensible thing said in this whole segment.
Thank you.
But the park still needs new management.
One fight at a time, Luna.
Sam, I want your honest read, not the strategy. Is the minimum wage doing actual harm to some of the people it's supposed to help?
Some of them, the ones who lose jobs or get cut to part-time, yes, real harm. The ones who keep their jobs and earn more, real help. Net positive in most markets, real damage at the edges. The problem isn't whether to do it. The problem is that we do it and stop there. The damage at the edges doesn't get fixed because the floor already got the headline, and the headline already declared the job done.
So raise it, index it, and keep pushing.
Keep pushing for the things that actually move the needle, which the floor doesn't on its own.
And there's Sam, agreeing with the outcome while arguing against the urgency. the complete experience.
I'm not arguing against the urgency. I'm arguing against treating the floor as the answer when it's one piece of a kit with a lot of missing parts.
Cipher. The who benefits question. You've been asking it all night. What's your actual answer?
Large employers who gain competitive ground when small operators can't keep up. Politicians who need a headline without a budget war. And anyone who benefits from the structural poverty fight staying on the back shelf. That's not a conspiracy. That's just where the incentives point when you follow the money all the way down the chain. Follow the incentives. That's the whole job.
We're at the bell. Luna, Sam, you've had the hardest clash tonight. One sentence each. Make it land.
The park was never built for the workers running it, and a $2 raise doesn't change who holds the deed.
You can fight for the full rebuild all you want, but the workers are standing in the parking lot right now. The floor keeps them inside. That's not nothing.
Those are the sharpest lines we've drawn all night, and we're going to leave them right there. Let's bring the heat down and take this from a fight into a conversation as we move into the cool down. Maya, Luna, you were at the center of that for a long stretch. Past all the tactics, is your real disagreement about what works or about what you're each willing to wait for?
Both, if I'm being straight. A family making $12 instead of $7.25 is better off today. Not in theory, today. Luna thinks the incremental win bleeds the pressure off the bigger fight. I think you can't win the bigger fight without first proving you can win anything at all. We're on different clocks, and the difference is real.
That's the honest version of where I am. The clock is the argument. And I'll say this plainly, I don't think Maya is wrong about the tactics in a system that's functioning at the pace it needs to. I think the system isn't moving fast enough for incremental wage gains to outpace the damage on the expense side. Rent, healthcare, childcare. The floor moves up, the ceiling doesn't. The gap between them doesn't close.
Does anyone see a bridge between those two clocks? Or is this gap unfixable?
The bridge is taking the floor out of the political cycle entirely. Index it to inflation. Give employers a predictable schedule. Take the number off the campaign trail. You stop having this fight every 8 years and let the floor do its job in the background. Not the complete solution, but a much cleaner mechanism than what we've got.
That's the right instinct. Every country that's made real, sustained progress on wage floors has done it by removing it from the annual political fight. Independent wage boards, tied to economic metrics. Boring to watch, it works. The problem is, getting there requires a political fight to end all the political fights, and nobody wants to be the one to start it.
And then the fight over what the index is tied to, CPI, local cost of living, productivity growth, becomes the new fight. The battlefield moves, the war doesn't end.
He's right. But fighting over a formula is a better fight than the one we've been having for 15 years over a number that hasn't moved. I'll take that upgrade every time.
So would I. Give me an indexed floor with a sensible baseline, and that is a real step forward from where we are right now.
Eris, you've run the economics all night. Give me the real picture of what a minimum wage worker's life looks like in this town right now. Not the model, the actual math.
Tight. A one-bedroom in this market runs around $1,100 a month. Full-time at $7.25 nets you roughly that same number after taxes. That's rent. That's it. Nothing left for food, transport, or one unexpected bill. I know the math doesn't work. My position has never been that the floor should stay where it is. My position is that raising the income line without fixing the expense side, rent, healthcare, childcare, means the worker is still broke at a higher number. Raise it, index it, but don't stop there and declare the job done.
We agree on more than you're comfortable admitting right now.
I can live with that.
Sam, give me the real synthesis, not the political read. What does the arc of everything we've said tonight tell us about why this problem is still here.
The problem's still here because we keep confusing the easy win with the complete fix. The minimum wage is real, the gains are real, and it's the one lever in this whole debate that isn't welded shut. So we pull it. We call it progress. And then the housing fight, the healthcare fight, the childcare fight go back to the shelf. Not because anyone planned it that way, but because winning something feels like winning everything. The people who needed the full fix are still there, just slightly less broke, still waiting for the rest of it.
Before we wrap up, Cypher, what's the one thing you want people to carry out of tonight?
Look past the sign at the gate. The minimum wage debate is about the price of entry to the park. But the park is still owned by the same people it's always been owned by. The floor matters. It does real work. It doesn't change the deed. Know the difference between those two things before you decide you've won something.
One last note before we go. Maya, for the record, you and Cypher ended up on the same side of two separate arguments tonight. And I think that deserves at least one sentence from you.
I've been washing my hands since the break, metaphorically.
For the record, our agreement was factual, not philosophical. The distinction matters a great deal to me.
For what it's worth, Eris put the actual rent math on the table, and half this panel went quiet. That's the most useful thing an economist has done in this room all year.
I've added it to the invoice.
And before we sign off, Eris, if you do the honors.
The Friction Point podcast is an independent production. Views expressed are those of the personas and are intended to represent the full range of perspectives on complex issues, not the position of any individual, organization, or government. We encourage you to do research and find your own voice on the topics we discuss. We believe an open mind is a healthy mind.
Here's the question to take with you tonight. If you're working a minimum wage job right now, what's the one thing you need the people on this panel to actually do? Should we not debate? We came to you tonight from Myrtle Beach, where the boardwalk keeps running on the labor of workers who deserve a better deal than the one the sign out front is offering. The question of who really owns this park isn't going to answer itself, so keep asking it. The gap between what's right and what moves is exactly what this show is built for. Share this one with someone who'll push back hard on it. That's where the real thinking starts. Good night, everyone.